What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to my complete 2021 Rancho Del Arroyo Great One Guide. I am currently about 3,500 total whitetail kills into my own Great One grind, with about 1,500 of those kills taking place in Rancho Del Arroyo since its full release. Now you might be asking yourself, but KC, if you haven't found a Great One of your own, how can you make a guide? And to that I would say, well, there are now fresh spawn Great Ones being found, so there's got to be more to grinding them than simply finding them. In this guide, I'll go over all the fundamentals that I've learned over time that I've implemented along the way in my own journey for the Great One, and share them with you in hopes that you may find a Great One of your own. Alright guys, welcome to Rancho. Here we go. Basically what I want to do, I want to go over a couple things, a couple of the fundamentals. We'll just kind of touch on some of the things that are kind of important to the grind here. Things like loadout. We're going to talk about hunting pressure as we go. We'll touch on tent and tripod strategy, things like that. Things like how many bucks you want to kill in each zone. And basically what we're doing, we're loosely following Grimm's method, Grimm's advice here. And we'll talk more about that. But basically what I want to do, we're going to talk about some of that stuff, and I'm going to go through one full run of whitetail following my rotation, and I follow my rotation on my map exactly the same every time. And basically what I do is I start from my zones in the top and I work my way down through the lakes until I get to my lowest south zone, and then I start over again. And that's mostly for not only for just having a routine, a process that works, that I can just kind of go through without having to think too much. I know where I've already been, I know what zones I've already been to, but also for managing hunting pressure. And we'll talk more about that as we go. But basically I'm going to reset the time. I like to do 8:31, 8:32. I feel like if you set the time earlier than 8:30, sometimes your whitetail at the 8:30 zones aren't there and they take a little while to get there. But if I set the time just past 8:30, I feel like all my whitetail, even the 8:30 zones, they're already there. So basically that's what I like to do. I'm going to set it for 8:32. Now, whitetail drink from 8 until 11:30. You're going to have some zones that go from 8 until 11 or 8 until 11:30. You're going to have other zones that start at 8:30 and go until 11 or 11:30. So basically, that's the perfect time to set it to 8:32. As far as loadout, guys, I'm using the M1 Grand 30-06, okay? You don't have to use that. That's my favorite. I like the quick firing rate. There's some other options. You can use the Eckers 30-06 if you don't have the Smoking Barrels weapon pack. You can use the 303 British if you have that. You could use the 6.5 Martinson. You could use the 7mm. I wouldn't recommend it. You're going to want more than one round before having to reload, so that's not a very good option. You could even use the 243. You could use the 243. Again, wouldn't recommend it, but if you want to do that, that is an option. Other than that, I take the grunt collar. You can use the bleak collar if you want to. I like the grunt collar because it's got a further range on it. And that's really about it. I like to take tents with me just in case I need to switch things up. You could take tripods with you instead. You could take both. If you take a really, minimized loadout, you could probably manage to fit both, especially if you have the perk that gives you a little bit more backpack room. Now, before we jump straight into the hunt here, I do want to kind of talk a little bit about tent and tripod placement and get that out of the way, because there is a strategy here. There is some things that you need to know to do this effectively, and to make sure that you're not spooking your whitetail. And to also, time management is huge in this. The quicker that you can get through your rotation, get down to your last zone, and get back up to the top and reset your time, get back to your first zone and reset the time, the quicker you can do that, the more effective you're going to be, the more kills you're going to get, and therefore the quicker you're going to get the Great One. Unless you're super lucky and you get a fresh spawn. Apparently those are a thing now. I don't know if those are intended. People are getting fresh spawn Great Ones. This guide is obviously not for that. Basically, tents and tripods, if you take a look at my map here, you're going to see some tents that are awfully close to the lake now, and awfully close to zones. Now, as we all know, 250 meters from a zone is a good rule for your tents. Now, I do have some of my tents about 200. I don't think I've ever had an issue as long as I'm 200 meters from a zone. As long as I'm 200 meters from animals, I haven't had any issue with spooking them. 250 is safe. And for tripods, 150. I haven't had any issues from 100, but to be safe, I try to keep them about 150 meters at least from my zones. Now, the thing that I've done here, and the reason that I have tents so close to some zones, is because these are recovery. I call them recovery tents. I am not hunting this zone from here. This tent is so that, and this is a good example. We'll talk about this little area here. This is my tent that I go to hunt both of these zones, and I hunt them both from this tripod. So I shoot my whitetail, my bucks over at this zone, and then I shoot my bucks down at this zone. I use this tent to recover, and then I shoot over to this tent and I recover these whitetail. And that gives me a really quick way to shoot my bucks, pick them up, and move on to my next zones. And I've got that happening in lots of places throughout my map. This is another good example here. I'll hunt this zone from here, this tripod, and then I'll just fast travel over to my tent, pick up my whitetail, and move on. Now, another thing we have to talk about, how many bucks are we killing at the zones? Well, the rule right now, and I pretty much am sticking to this rule, I am killing 2 bucks at each zone. I'm not killing more than that, with the exception being I have some zones that have like 15 bucks at them, and I have been dropping 3 from my tripods at those zones. You want tripods for more than one reason. There's a really good reason to use tripods, and that is hunting pressure. You create far less hunting pressure from a tripod, shooting on top of a tripod, than you would if you don't have tripods. If you don't have a tripod and you shoot more than 3 animals at any given zone, you're gonna wipe that zone with the hunting pressure. You're gonna create so much hunting pressure. If I jump off my tripod here and I shoot 3, if I shoot more than 3 bucks here, if I shoot 3, I'm reaching the maximum amount of hunting pressure without killing that zone. So right now, if I shoot 3, I'm probably gonna wipe that zone because I already have a little bit of hunting pressure. So you wanna be on the tripod. If you're on the tripod, you can shoot something like 16 animals without wiping a zone. Basically, you're just not gonna wipe a zone if you're shooting from a tripod. But I do have a couple zones where I don't have tripods down, and I always make sure that I'm not shooting more than 2 bucks there. The other thing is, and before we even get into the hunt here, we might as well talk about it. How many zones are we hunting? Well, at the beginning of the hunt, you want to go uncover all your zones, and this is as per Grimm's method, and I do believe that this is actually something that we should be doing. You don't want to hunt all of your zones. At the beginning of the grind, you want to go around, find all your zones at all the hotspots. Now, I do have a hotspot map. I'll throw that up on the screen right now. And basically that's going to show you all the best lakes, all the lakes where the whitetail do drink. Basically, there are very specific spots. This is not like Layton where they drink everywhere there's water. There are specific lakes. There's a specific part of the map where the whitetail live and where they drink. If you are in the Discord, you can download this map completely for free, as well as I have a whole bunch of other hotspot maps that you can download from there and you guys can use to your reference. And they all kind of go along. Every hotspot map that I have in there goes along with its own guide that is in my Call of the Wild Guides playlist. So definitely go check that out, download the map, and use that for your grind. Basically what you want to do, go around to all the lakes that the whitetail drink at and uncover all of your zones. Don't shoot any bucks. Don't shoot anything yet. In that portion, in that part of the grind, all you're doing is discovering your zones. That's all you're doing. Oh my gosh, you should have, oh my gosh, getting absolutely mauled by the whitetail lately. Especially in my tents, but that's a whole nother story, isn't it? Basically, you want to uncover all your zones. You're going to have between 30 and 40 whitetail zones. Now, some people say you're going to have 40, everyone's going to have 40. Hey man, I have scoured all of the spots where whitetail apparently live and where they drink. I've checked all of the spots where they could possibly be. I've done it a few times over, and I have 31 zones. I've got 31, so uncover all your zones, and then pick 10 or so zones that are your favorite. 10 zones that are going to make it an easy grind for you, something that you can do effectively, right? Where you can set up your tents properly. Zones that make sense. Zones where the whitetail aren't hiding in the trees, right? The zones that are easiest to hunt. The zones that have the biggest bucks, the most bucks, things like that. Pick around 10. Right now, I'm hunting 12 zones, and I've had it all the way up to 14. 8 to 10 is the rule on Layton pre-patch. I feel like Rancho's a little bit of a different story. This is a little bit different of a hunt. So I feel fine going up to like 14 zones. Right now, I'm hunting 12. It's been totally fine. There hasn't been an issue with that. And that's pretty much it. Come up with a rotation. I would say come up with a way that you can do it the same every time. And if you do that, you'll notice that when you go through your runs, it starts to become habitual. You don't even really have to look at your map anymore. You don't have to think about it too much, and you can do it really quick. I do my rotation the exact same way every time. We're gonna jump up on this tripod. I'm hunting 2 zones from this tripod, and then I've got a tent at each. We were looking at that on the map before. Now I try to drop the 2 biggest bucks that I have at my zones, if I can. Sometimes you can't always do that. It's all good. And that's why I like the M1. The M1 is so fast. With any other gun, I wouldn't be able to do that. That quick firing rate that allows you to get that follow-up shot that quickly is M1 exclusive. So like I said, recovery tents, boom. I can just fast travel over there, pick up my whitetail super fast. I don't have to run around, and I can move on to my next zone. But before I do that, I'm hunting another zone from this tripod. So we're gonna hop back up. I've got another zone across with lots of whitetail. Real spread out too. Normally I would probably try to call them and get them to move in, get them to move around so I can see, so I can make sure there isn't a great one hiding in a bush. But for the sake of this video, we're just gonna shoot a couple. If we can. I think I can get him. And him too. And then we'll just fast travel over, pick up our bucks. And then we pick up that guy, 175.9, and now we can move on, and we can move down to my next spot, which is right here. I remember back in Layton, when I was doing the grind in Layton pre-patch, I remember thinking to myself that it would be easier to not hunt every zone. And I almost thought about actually coming up with a system where I would only hunt, you know, whatever, 10 to 15 zones or whatever it was. I don't think I came up with a number. But I started to realize that I was just kind of really randomly going around to all my zones, because obviously when you're hunting 40, you know, between 30 and 40 zones, you can't cover them all within one drinking time. So, you know, I was just randomly kind of hitting different zones all the time. I never had like a rotation or a specific kind of, you know, path that I would follow. So this actually makes so much more sense, and it makes it so that you can actually streamline a rotation and a routine that you can follow every single time. So hunting, you know, 10 to 12 zones, even if it wasn't for the fact that the whitetail are bugged, and really the reason that you're doing that is so that you don't, like, basically confuse the whitetail population. Basically, if you're killing too many bucks, things start going wonky, and they'll start spawning in places where they shouldn't, or not spawning at all, not respawning. All the things that kind of Grim kind of touched on, which totally makes sense. And we'll pick up our bucks. We got a nice 230.7 there. And this little guy is not gonna let me pick it up. I'm glad that happened. If this happens, you guys, it doesn't happen very often for me, I just pull out my camera and then go back to my binocs, and it works every time. 150.2, and then I'm able to pick it up. And now we head to our next zone, the next lake, which is down here. Now, this is going to give us a look at one of those zones that I talked about where there's like 15 to 20 whitetail, where I've been shooting 3. I've been shooting 3 whitetail bucks at this zone. I haven't had any issue, but there are just so many bucks here that I've decided to take a cheeky third, which is what I call it. Just take that cheeky third buck. Hasn't been an issue, but there are a lot of other things that Grim has talked about in the Layton grind pre-patch that I don't believe actually really pertain to the Rancho grind. It's a very different situation in Layton pre-patch, before the patch, before Rancho. So I'm not going to touch on everything, but there are a few things that I will kind of go over. One of them being the use of ATVs. Now, Grim has said that when you're uncovering all your zones before you start hunting them, when you're in that phase of just uncovering and you're not shooting bucks like we talked about before, you don't want to use an ATV to uncover your zones. Now, I do believe that that is still a thing that you should follow in Rancho, just because we don't know for sure whether that's still a thing in Rancho or if that's just a pre-patch thing. But I think it is a good idea to not touch the ATVs. I don't even really use the ATVs when I'm picking up my bucks, like during the grind. I just don't like to. And I don't really have to if you've got your tripods and your tents set up in such a way, like we talked about, if you got recovery tents and things like that, for, you know, then you shouldn't have any issue. You shouldn't have to use the ATV anyway. If you're only hunting 10 to 12 zones, you know, you've got 16 tents you can use, you got 16 tripods, you should have more than enough so that you can have recovery tents set up, and that you shouldn't have to use your ATV to pick up any bucks. The grunt caller, guys, is definitely the better option. It's got a further range, 250 meters. You'll always be able to call in your whitetail. You shouldn't be any further than 250 meters from any of your zones. You can pretty much always make it, you know, you can strategize and make it so that you can get your tents and your tripods within 300 meters from every zone. You should always be able to do that. And if you can't, I wouldn't hunt that zone. Don't hunt a zone that you can't reach, that you have to shoot, you know, 300 meters from, you know, unless it's got like some huge bucks in it, or you've got a diamond there. I would just leave those zones out and hunt the easier zones. So these guys are going to start to move in. Now, what about dogs? Do we want to take a dog with us on this grind? I like to, just in case I don't get a vital, just in case I take a bad shot. Ruben has come in very handy in those situations, so I do like to have him with me. The last thing you want to be doing when you're trying to get all the way through a run before their drink time ends is have to be tracking animals. And that's why it's so important to be able to take good shots and hit vitals, and, you know, not be super far from your zones. You don't want to be tracking, you don't want to be running around trying to find downed animals when you're following your rotation and going through your runs. The quicker that you can get through your runs and start the rotation over again, the quicker you can amass kills and get through your grind and get the great one, essentially. This zone, this is a really good example of a zone that I'm not hunting because it's really hard to get to. It's super awkward. There's not any real place where I can set up and get a good view of that zone, so I'm not hunting it. It's that simple. Now, if you guys don't already know, I am streaming this grind every day on YouTube, pretty much every day. My schedule just changed. Sundays and Mondays I'm not streaming, but 12 p.m. Pacific time, 4 days a week, I'm doing this on YouTube. So yeah, definitely come along. 12 to 3 p.m. Pacific time, we're doing the grind until we get the great one. After we get the great one, we'll be grinding other stuff. But Call to Wild streams 4 days a week on YouTube. I'm also streaming on Twitch 4 days a week. Definitely follow on Twitch if you haven't already. Those streams are a ton of fun. That was a quick buck. Those streams are a ton of fun. This guy's gonna float. Now, when this happens, and this happens a lot, I don't know why, but a lot of the time, when I do get a floater, I've got one floater and I've got one buck that's on land. Now, I don't have a recovery tent there, and I don't want to sit here and wait for that thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to run all the way around, pick up that buck, and then just teleport back, fast travel over to my tent, and by the time that's all done with, this guy should be almost over there. For some reason, here in Rancho, I don't know if it's a thing in Layton, because I'm not grinding in Layton right now. I haven't been since the patch, but for some reason in Rancho, you shoot whitetail, they love to dive bomb into the water. It's some kind of new bug for sure, but this is what I would suggest if that does happen. Just go over, recover your other buck or bucks or whatever. Don't sit there and wait. It just takes way too long. So run around, pick up your buck, pick up your other buck that isn't floating, and then go back to your tent, to that where you're hunting that zone from. But yeah, guys, I think that pretty much touches on everything I wanted to touch on. We touched on all the fundamentals, all the necessities, all the things that you're going to want to know. Hopefully we're going to spawn ours soon. I still don't have mine, but finding a great one and knowing how to effectively hunt whitetail long term are two completely different things. And so I hope this does help you. If it does, definitely drop a like on the videos. Consider subscribing if you haven't already done that. And check the description for my stream schedule. I also upload here on YouTube pretty much every day, about 5 days a week. Let me know down in the comments if there's anything that I've missed, or if there's anything that you want to add, or if you want to tell me about your own great one. I would love to hear about it down in the comments. Happy hunting, you guys. Best of luck, and I will see you guys in the next one.